When the Nintendo Switch was announced, I was curious to see what games would be coming to the system. Of course, everyone knew The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was coming, but what else would there be at launch? What else would there be in the first year? And during the Switch presentation, they didn't show a whole hell of a lot. They showed, 1-2 Switch, which I could care less about. And of course, they showed a lot of ARMS. But then towards sort of the end of the presentation, they showed this sizzle reel of all these different games. And one of the games that caught my eye was a Bomberman game. I was like, Bomberman? No, this can't be. Because Bomberman hasn't been around in forever. Once Konami bought Hudson Soft, Bomberman pretty much went bye-bye, except for a terrible Bomberman game on the Xbox 360, Bomberman Act Zero, which we're just not going to talk about it. But it really made me sad because Bomberman was such a pick-up-and-play game. It was always really fun, whether you're playing the NES, the TurboGrafx 16, the awesome Saturn version, the N64 version. There was always a fun version of Bomberman on pretty much every system when I was growing up, and it just went away, and it really bothered me. So it was really interesting to see Konami bringing back Bomberman to the Nintendo Switch. What also makes it interesting is that Nintendo actually approached Konami and said, hey, we want Bomberman on the Nintendo Switch. This is a good fit for our system. So I was really interested in it, and Bomberman Super Bomberman R ended up being a launch title for the Nintendo Switch. So of course I picked it up. And I've been playing it all weekend, and I've decided to make a video on this to tell you guys whether or not Super Bomberman R is worth it. So, is Super Bomberman R worth it? Let's find out. So being a Bomberman game, it's sort of broken up into two segments. There's of course the single player mode and the multiplayer mode. Now we'll talk about the single player mode first because it actually kind of surprised me, to be honest with you. So the story is very light. The Super Bomber Rangers are going after some guy named Bugler in outer space, and they're trying to blow him up because he's a bad guy. Like, nobody really cares about the story in Bomberman, but what I liked about the story was the way that it sort of plays out. So before every level, there is this sort of cutscene, and it's very 90s cartoony style. It's not heavily animated, it's actually pretty much stop still motion, but I really liked it, and I really liked the voice actors on it because they're very over the top. They're very sort of silly, and it really feels like a 90s cartoon show. And that's what I grew up watching, was a lot of 90s cartoons. So although, the story is very weak, it's not a huge narrative like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, so if you're expecting some RPG-like story, look elsewhere. But it does help flow the game along, and it does help keep things interesting because I was always interested in seeing, what the Bomber Rangers were going to get into next. Who was the next guy? What was the next area? So it was actually pretty well done in that regard, but I could definitely see some people not liking the aesthetic and not liking that style, but for me, it was a good fit, and I feel that it really added to the game.
Cool guy like me.
We're all going, all of us. If we chicken out now, we won't be able to bring peace to the universe.
Ha! What's wrong?
Nothing. Never mind. Anyway, all of you stick close to me.
So the way the single player works out is pretty simple. Basically, there's a bunch of planets, and each planet is a level. Within the levels, there are different acts, and you're doing basically different things in the levels. Some levels have you, or some acts have you defeating a certain amount of enemies. Some levels have you getting, certain keys, and some have you hitting switches, so on and so forth. So they mix it up a little bit. It does keep things fresh, and all of the levels are sort of Bomberman levels. Some of them are bigger than normal levels. You're having like several segments to the level, but it's good enough. I mean, it's fun, it helps get you into the game, but one of the nice things about the system, the Nintendo Switch, is that it comes with those two Joy-Cons. And this is where Bomberman kind of shines a little bit because you can play the single player mode with a friend. And you can just use the Joy-Cons. The game fully supports the Joy-Cons. So both of you can go through the story mode together and sort of get the mechanics down for the game, sort of get a feel for the game. And it's pretty fun in that regard when you're playing with someone. When you're playing by yourself, it's not too bad either. One of the facts or features that I really liked about the game was the boss battles though. You have sort of these boss battles that basically the way the boss battle starts out is it's sort of a one-on-one on a Bomberman map, and it's actually pretty tricky. They're very fast and they have special bombs or whatever, but after you defeat that, you go to a boss level, which is just like this huge open area, and there's this huge boss who's just like towering over you and just so big. and they have weak spots. So you have to find their weak spots and exploit their weak spots with your bombs that you've gotten throughout the levels as you progress through the acts. And I really liked the boss battles. They were actually really fun. They made you think, and you had to figure out, where's the weak spot? How do I defeat this guy? And it was really well done. I really like that part of the single player mode. I'm not saying the single player mode is great. It's definitely more of a time waster, but the boss battles and the aesthetics of the cutscenes and whatnot really sort of made it decent to me. I didn't expect much from it. I was more interested in the multiplayer aspect, but the fact that you could play with other people, the fact that the story is sort of there, and the fact that the boss battles were really fun, it made me keep wanting to go on and keep progressing through the story mode. So surprisingly, the story mode is solid. It's definitely not a selling point of the game, but it's really solid. Now, of course, nothing really matters if the multiplayer on Bomberman sucks. So how does the multiplayer fare? Because really, that's probably why everyone's buying the game.
Never forget the...
So there are several facets to the multiplayer aspect of Bomberman. You of course have your standard local multiplayer, which supports up to 8 people. And since the Joy-Cons are each a controller, you can have 2 right out of the box, which is super cool because you can just play with someone while they're over at your house. And you can fully customize all sorts of different things for the levels. You could purchase different levels. There's actually a shop system in the game where you can purchase different characters, add-ons to your characters, and you can also purchase different maps, which really helps, motivate you to keep playing the single player and earning those coins, or the battle points, so that you can access this other stuff. So that's another nice little feature that the multiplayer sort of ties into the single player. Now, as with any Bomberman, like I said, you can customize tons of stuff. You can have different pickups on the map. You can have different map layouts. You can have it where when you die, you enter the side of the map so that you can throw bombs and to kill people. Really well done, basic, but really well done. And the local multiplayer is just so much fun, and especially if you have more Joy-Cons, you have another friend, that has a Switch or something. That is where the game really shines. The local multiplayer, rock solid, so much fun. And then, of course, you have the online aspect, which is what I was really interested in. And unfortunately, right now, at the time of this video, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Konami has said that there is a bit of input lag when playing online, and sometimes you notice it, sometimes you don't. A lot of times I didn't notice it, but there were some matches where I'd be like, okay, go down, and the dude would just stand there for a second and then go down, and it was, in a game like Bomberman, it's highly based on your reflexes, it's highly based on your critical thinking. And so it was very frustrating for those few matches that were really laggy. Now you can adjust the setting in the options menu to sort of play with people closer to you, or choose to play with people with good internet connections, which I highly recommend you do because you want the online to be as good as possible. Now the basic online is broken up also into 2 things. There's a battle league and then a free play mode. Now the battle league is sort of like the competitive thing. You get points for winning, and as you get more points, your battle league ranking goes up. I didn't do very well in that. I realized that I am not a great Bomberman player. I love to play it, but I'm not great at it. So it was very competitive and very sort of high-strung and stressful, and maybe not for me. I liked the free play stuff more because that was more customizable. You could have 8 players, you can have, crazy stuff on the map, you can have where the map, blocks disappear and whatnot. That's where the fun was. And unfortunately, the lag issue, the input lag issue does creep over into that. But Konami is working on it, so I can't really say that it's terrible, because I did play a ton of matches that were really smooth and really fun, but those few matches that you play that do suck really are frustrating, and that was sort of a big down point for me because a lot of people are playing this to play online. It's one of the few Switch launch titles that has an online presence and has an online, focus, and to see that was sort of disappointing. But I hope Konami can figure out how to work it out, because that's really a selling point for people, is the multiplayer. Rounding things out, you have of course the graphics and the sound. We've already talked about the voiceovers, which I liked. Some people won't, but I personally like them. The graphics are decent, man. They're not spectacular, they're nothing really special, but they get the job done. Everything looks nice, the explosions look nice, the maps are varied and whatnot. Each planet has a theme to it when you're doing the single player missions, so there's incentive to keep playing because you want to see the different planets, the different layouts and whatnot. Everything is really solid, and I think that's sort of the main focus of Super Bomberman R, is solid. So, is Super Bomberman R worth $50? Let's find out in the recap.
Again, did you? I'm such a heartbreaker.
So if you live in the US, Super Bomberman R is a $50 game. Now this is a launch title, so companies are just sort of throwing things out there and seeing what sticks. Now I did have a lot of fun with Super Bomberman R. I'm going to continue having a lot of fun with Super Bomberman R. I also only paid $41 using Amazon Prime. Now do I think it's worth the $50? If you're a big Bomberman fan, you will probably think yes. But if you're not a huge Bomberman fan, you might want to wait on this. You might want to wait for a price drop. I think the $30 to $40 price point is much more attractive for this game. Definitely 30 if you're not, you know, super into Bomberman or whatever. At 41, I feel like I got my money's worth. It's a solid game top to bottom. Once the online sort of gets figured out by Konami, which you would think they would do before releasing the game, I think it'll be a really, really fun game. But right now, as it stands, it's just solid. If I had to score it numerically, I'd probably give it a 6.5 or a 7 in that area. So that sort of gives you an indication of where I stand with this game. At $41, I feel like I got a decent amount of money's worth out of it. I'm gonna still play it. But at $50, it's definitely a tough sale. Only the most hardcore Bomberman fans would be willing to pay $50 for this and be satisfied, in my personal opinion. So that's what I think of Super Bomberman R. Did you pick up this game? Did you pick up a Switch? You know, let me know in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think of Super Bomberman R if you picked it up, or if you plan on picking it up. Let me know what you thought about this review as well. I've sort of done a little different style than I normally do. Thank you for checking out this video. If you are new here, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I love to see new faces in the comments. Make sure you check out other videos on this channel. And as always, if you really like my face, check out my Patreon page. I'll catch you guys next time. I'm going to play Breath of the Wild some more. Later.